Hello and welcome to the Gooners podcast on a very light news day for Arsenal and football in general. We're back, only maybe like 18 hours since the last podcast that we did, which was on a topic about some like potential European Soccer League, or maybe that's not what it's called. The ESL. Oh, European Super League, I think is what it's called. In any case, we have a great panel tonight. We're going to go right to it. I'm going to skip over the normal kind of 10 minutes of stupidity and banter that I'm known for. And we're going to go right to the discussion because we're going to talk briefly about the Arsenal-Fulham match and then get into the European Super League that we have. So as usual, I got my my running mate, Mikey Hers, with me. How you doing, Mikey?
Great, man. It was really hard to actually be productive at work today when Twitter's drawing me in with these updates. You know, every minute there's something new and I'm like constantly replying and having debates. So I think it's almost like historical. It's amazing. It might change a lot of the sport as we know it for many, many years. So crazy, but no, all in all, alive, healthy, can't ask for more.
I'm hoping it changes one thing, and I'm hoping somehow it like reduces my weight by 100 pounds, and then like I'll support the idea. So you know, I am open to that. JP Morgan. Also joining us, John from Miami. What was it called when you used to do it? The Miami podcast, the Good Miami Gooner podcast. Well, I forgot what it was called.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I think Mike kind of said it best. It's definitely we're living through a historical moment right now, one way or another. It's not going to be the same after this. Whatever the result of this is, football is not going to be the same one way or another. Which my very first thought was, I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but my very first thought was, it's going to end up being nothing, and this is all a big thing, but it can't be nothing anymore. It could be not what we're being told it was, but it can't be nothing anymore. But it's not nothing, and we'll get into it for sure.
Yeah, we'll hold that to abeyance. Thanks for joining us. And back again is Ryan Rocastle. Always good to see you. And you know, we've talked a lot of football. Seems to be kind of after losses more often than after wins. I was hoping this would be different, but yeah, it's another shit show that you've agreed to come back on. So Ryan, it's always great to see you, buddy.
It goes sometimes. No, good to see you.
And you know, the one thing about the show we did last night was because it really started at around 1 o'clock in the morning UK time and went until like 3 or 3:30 UK time. While there were some people in the chat that live over in Europe and England and the UK, we didn't hear from too many. A couple were nice enough to join us, but they didn't want to kind of show themselves in bed. Their naked spouses would have been on camera. It would have been really awkward. So today, we certainly want to get the unique opinion, unique compared to the rest of us on the panel of, growing up around the game and around the team and how that's, impacting your view of all this right now. But first, let's have a quick roundtable about the Arsenal-Fulham game. Arsenal won, Fulham won, missed the opportunity, if it even ends up mattering, to pull within a point of Everton, to pull within 2 of Spurs. Instead, we're stuck in 9th in a 6-team league. But, what are we going to do? A lot of people very, very positive about this game. We do a prediction thing, Ryan, where, we have people send in their 20 or 30-second predictions, scores, outcomes, details. And other than myself and Andy, the original founders of this podcast, everyone was just super, super positive. 4-0, 5-0, 3-1. And I'm like, have you met Arsenal? Like we seem to have turned a corner, but we've seen this 8 times before. And then there's a stinker that we put out. We always lose after Europa League games. Like, why do you think that we've suddenly resolved this? So, I mean, Ryan, take us through your thoughts with regards to, how Arteta and the club approached the game and whether you were confident going into it.
Yeah, I was confident going into it, and I was fine with the approach because I felt like we had enough to beat Fulham. When you consider the form they're in, and I just think it would be one that if he had played, if he had rested, or if he had played the full strength side, and there was injuries or something came from it, people would be going, why has he done that for that? And I was fine with the team. The performance wasn't very good. Like, I don't actually think it was the worst home performance. That's more to do with how we played at home than anything. And I do think on another day we would have won that game 2-0. You know, when you think Martinelli missed 3 chances, quite good ones as well. Pepe's missed from 2 yards out. You know, they scored the goal they scored. It's such a joke. I can't even. And the one that we had disallowed was. So it's not like it wasn't good, but it wasn't. In my opinion, it wasn't terrible. We could have. It could have gone the other way very, very easily.
Did it kind of feel maybe like a little bit like the first leg against Slavia Prague, where like, you know, if we had just taken our chances, if Saka doesn't miss the goal, if Lacazette doesn't, you know, hit the post, you know, we'd be talking about a business-like victory over a team we should have beaten, and that same thing could have happened with Fulham. But again, we didn't take our chances until the very, very end.
Very much so, and I think that is a difference between after Christmas, what's happening after Christmas and before. But before Christmas, we were relying on half chances. Really, it was really very little that was being created. Now, after Christmas, in the games that we've dropped points, in basically all of them, apart from Man City and Liverpool, we've had good chances and we should have won the game. Even this game, I think Fulham had that penalty. I think
they had one shot on goal.
I think they had a half a chance that trickled past the post. It was
the one that Ryan kind of stumbled on.
Yeah,
John. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying it is one of them.
John, you get plugged into the numbers. I know that you're a big XG guy. You're a big no, but I think we had something like double-digit shots, not shots on goal, but double-digit shot attempts to their 3. 1 on target for them, something like maybe, I mean, the stats are out there. I just don't have them. Maybe 5 or 6 on target for us.
Right.
Ryan's right. We saw games in the first half of this season where we had 3 shots, none on target. You know, at least in this situation, they are some chances, and you know, the games we put them away are the games like Sheffield United. The games we don't are the games like Fulham. I mean, what did you make out of that performance yesterday, if we can call it that?
So I guess, I mean, I'm sorry, it's just hard for me to like switch back to actually thinking about football, like the actual game, which is kind of crazy. But when you're looking at kind of how we played and the performance that we put in against Fulham, it's one of those situations where I would rather be on having the squad creating incredible chances and not putting them away than not creating enough, which is what we used to be kind of dealing with. You know, there's times when you're just not going to be able to score on a given day, and that just might not be some underlying real big issue that we have.
Are missed opportunities better than no opportunities?
Yes, I think missed opportunities
they are. I mean, they're still frustrating, but
they're extremely frustrating. And I kind of like to look at it's not an excuse for how we played, but I like to look at the context. You look at Liverpool, who lost once to Fulham and then drew with them. You look at Spurs, who drew with Fulham. You look at Everton. You know, all these teams have done poorly against Fulham. That doesn't mean that we could. And the reality is, we should have done better. So when I look at this game and I'm trying to analyze it and say, like, from a numbers perspective, should we have done more? Yes, but I also like to look at it from a contextual perspective, see how other teams have performed against against Fulham, and kind of look at it, step back a little bit, and say, like, you know, because remember, before all this European Super League stuff, people were melting down about this Fulham result. And there
was that brief hour where people were upset about Fulham.
They literally, they lost their minds, and then all of a sudden it was almost like silly. But look, I think that when you're considering, like you said, other than opportunities not being converted, I'd rather have opportunities being created that aren't converted, which on a better day you probably might put away. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah, well, and it certainly it almost seems like a week ago that this game happened because of the news cycle between now and then. It's literally been 29 hours since the game ended, and it feels like 2 weeks. Mikey, one of the big things that we saw yesterday involved this guy.
Bird Leno.
Bird Leno was given a rest in favor of Matt Ryan. Conspiracy theorists, and I think those people are ridiculous because I never believe in a conspiracy, would say, well, Ryan came out or Leno came out and basically, in a nutshell, said he was open to ending his career somewhere else. I mean, I don't think this was not one of the worst things that people have said about agitating to leave, and that Leno was being punished over that. I don't agree with that. I can't imagine you do, but how the man management and the long-term management of Matt Ryan, what do you think yesterday was all about? And was that a one-off, or are we going to see that, going forward?
Well, first, I think, first I didn't see the Leno comments. What I saw, the Bird Leno comments. The Bird Leno comments that I saw was they asked him about his contract. He said he has 2 years left. He's 29, young for a goalkeeper. And now is not the time to talk about the contract. So I missed out on the I'm open to.
Those are my words, so maybe.
Okay. No wonder.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it back up. Yeah, he would actually. He said he would be open to a new adventure after this contract. So there is
that's certainly going to happen, but probably for different reasons.
Yeah, probably now. That's true.
Yeah, no. As I like to say, with this super money, we finally could buy Martinez, which is factually the best goalkeeper. So I mean, that's all we wanted. Full circle, baby. Full circle. Man management wise, I honestly think it was just part of the rotation. Yeah, he mentioned that there were a lot of players that weren't fully fit or 100% for this game. And look, Leno, you could argue that he's a goalkeeper and he plays every single game, but in a game that should, on paper, allow some flexibility, which liberties were taken with rotation. I kind of just believe Arteta. Ryan's been working his socks off. The Europa League, now we're in the knockout stages that you can't really afford to have a secondary goalkeeper there. I know Ryan's quality, but he's still kind of viewed as, the second option below Leno. So I never looked too much into this, like we spoke on previous pods about the Aubameyang thing. I never bought into the idea that the relationship was broken between him and Arteta. So when it comes to this situation, I kind of put it in the same situation where it's just kind of rotating and freshening up the squad. I think if we're looking on paper, if we're being honest, with the midfield, we're always going to take a step back when Partey's not in it. So other than that midfield pivot, you can make an argument that I think most Arsenal fans would have believed we would have secured the 3 points. And to John's point earlier, there were chances, like lots of chances. And then obviously the plays and the VAR decision that led up to that, I mean, that's a whole other can of worms where, funny enough, I would normally love to talk about VAR, but we got more pressing issues. We got a bigger evil this time around. But yeah, it's VAR. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, and that's just the fact. But I do believe that the manner in which they're using it is a little sketchy, to say the very least. But
would you describe it as sketchy AF?
Obviously. Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously.
By the way, Leeds have just equalized against Liverpool, and I think I'm going to have to say this with everything I say now about the Premier League, like it matters. Leeds is just leveled in the 87th minute. So
maybe Leeds' social media team will do what Fulham did and post that they
scored
against the European Super League.
That was brilliant.
The seventh place European Super League competitors.
I think that's the most frustrating, other than the Super League thing, of course, the most frustrating thing about this week, and it's happened to us so many times. Everton, Spurs, now maybe Liverpool. Everybody above us dropping points. And then we drop points. Dude, it's the most annoying thing ever, but hindsight and whatnot. Anyway, it's irrelevant. So we already qualified for the Super League, so I don't even care anymore.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I can actually focus on something else for the next 3 months. Anyone else have anything else to say about the Fulham game? Because if not, this will be the end of the segment on the Arsenal Fulham debacle. Ryan, anything? John, and anybody else? All right, so let's get to it then. If you're just joining us, thank you. If you joined us 15 minutes ago, thank you even more. Dean Christian is in the house. Tyler Dunn is or was in the house. I know Tyler from a few years back. He's a Manchester United fan, but open to calling us Super League fam at this point. So he's here. John from Arsenal Nova popped in just to insult Mikey Hers, which is as per usual.
Awesome. Glad to know I'm loved.
The tall blonde Stefan Selby's in the house. Good to see you, Stefan. Tony G. And of course Drago. I hope you got some sleep last night, mate. You were up until the very very, very late hours of the night. An hour later in Bulgaria than in England even. So fantastic to see you. Now let's talk about the European Super League. For me, and I'll start it around the around the bend with me. I'm literally kind of soft tissue right now when it comes to this. I'm still kind of formulating where I stand. I mean, there's a very initial visceral reaction, which is strongly negative, but I've kind of preached wait to worry, wait to learn a little bit what's going on before you start thrashing about. I understand the thrashing about because it's time to show resistance. It will go forward if and it will probably go forward anyway, but organized resistance is important, but organized resistance against what exactly? There's so much, to really know. So I'm trying to kind of hold it back personally, but I'm not anywhere close to sick about talking about this shit yet. So, Ryan, you've been to going to games, and the one thing I do have to say though is I have made a decision of who my next team will be. So I'm announcing that now. I'm Sutton United for life. Ryan, you've been going to games since you were a boy. You've been mascot. You've worked with the club. You've been around the club, obviously, growing up, and worked for another club who's in a very different kind of financial and positional standpoint and have close ties to QPR. What are your perspectives on this? I mean, I just open-ended. What are your initial thoughts on this for you?
Just hate it. Really hate it, to be honest. For me, it would change so much. I would just try. Me and my sister were just talking earlier about, imagining being successful in this, and we both were just like, it wouldn't feel any. The thing is, Mike, when Arsenal were really successful, I was just like, back this and the Invincible stuff. I was like 12, and me and my friends, and we always, my friends who support Arsenal, we always say like, we were a little bit young then. Like, imagine what it's going to be like when we next do it, kind of thing. And
we'll be in a what do they call them, rest home.
I mean, just always been like, even with the money that Chelsea spend and Man City and that, and we've always thought like, if we just can do it in our way, kind of thing. Okay, spend a bit of money, but like, do it with like class, or we really wanted to do it under Arsene. And then I kind of feel like that's why maybe it didn't connect with us with Unai, because it wasn't doing it kind of in that way. And you just feel like that's all gone, kind of thing, by joining this, because that feeling of winning it, or winning the league again, or winning the Champions League for the first time, that feeling that you'd get is completely gone, I think, by being part of this league. That's how I see it. That it wouldn't mean a tenth of what it was to when we won it back in 2004, and I think that's really sad that the club, well, not the club, because it's not the club. It's one man. It's one man at the club that has decided that we even with the advantage that we have, by being so well supported, like look at all you guys in America and in other parts of the world. We've got all this fan base. We got, he's worth 10 billion. The advantages that we already have. We can go and sign players like Aubameyang and Partey, and from clubs that are better than us right now. Or, on the pitch, we've still got that advantage. With all that, still, he doesn't think that we can get to where we want to be without basically cheating our way. And then even if we get there, you know, he wants to make sure that we're always there, not by being the best, but just by making sure there's no other competition. It's really quite sad, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely the brainchild of the rich man, and in this case, the rich American man, and other rich American men friends, and you know, it's very much, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, a lot because of the number of Americans we have on this podcast, but you know, it's very much the NFL model taking shape, and you know, and in the NFL, the owners of the 32 teams are each other's best friends, not their biggest rivals. They're best friends. They're a club, and that's kind of what, you know. Kroenke's now in a club with Perez and Henry and all these, and Glazer. So, John, our discussions one-on-one generally revolve around like body parts and body hair, and you know, we communicate most frequently on a 3-year-old level, and we like it that way.
If that.
But I do happen to know a few things about you, and I know that you have a very rational kind of business and law-based experience background, and you know, you're also the type not to really let emotion run the day. I mean, you are a soulless android when it comes to that, and so
my wife tells me the same thing.
Yeah, and she also says, "Ouch, you're hurting me," but the thing about having you on is that you're always going to kind of give a perspective that is kind of from multiple different viewpoints, and so again, generically, your first thoughts when you saw it, how it's evolving, and then I will, once we make it all the way around, I will drill down on a couple specific topics that I want to discuss as it relates to this. But where do you stand?
So just to answer your question, my initial reaction was, believe it or not, that I was glad that Arsenal name was on the list, because for me, not being on that list would have been extremely, extremely troubling. It would have meant that we are not going to. First of all, this European Super League has been in the mix for, I would argue, over a decade. It's been in the pipelines, just waiting for the right time for everyone to get on board with it and the kind of the right environment. And so there's been a semblance, and we've heard Wenger talk about that it's going to happen within 10 years. And this was roughly about 10 years ago. It would have happened within the time frame that he indicated, likely postponed due to COVID, I would imagine. But the implications of us not being on that list and missing out on what was the inevitable kind of progression of this European Super League would have been, I think, monumentally disastrous for us. And that was my first inclination. I'm not happy with it. I think that it's definitely something that's going to. It seems like they're trying to take like the soul out of what it means to compete and what makes football special compared to American sports. You know, this notion of relegation and meritocracy and promotion, things like that, where you're just, you have to fight, and there's an actual, tangible, and visceral consequence for not being successful, and that is that you could actually get kicked out of the league. And then if I have to fight your way back, and that doesn't exist anymore. Nor does it really seem to exist the kind of strive for greatness that you need to do in the league to actually get into these spots for these major European competitions. That's not relevant anymore. So what is the difference now between 5th, 4th, and 19th in a league? So all of that is very concerning. But I will say, if I'm looking at it the way the owners are looking at it, first of all, this was inevitable, and second of all, it's such an important move for them because look, the American model, whether you like it or not, it does one thing extremely well, and that is to capitalize on that and to capitalize on sport. And nobody, I would argue, can capitalize in sport better than, let's say, Americans in terms of what we can extract from a sport. Financially, from a commercial perspective, it's almost mind-boggling. And it was just a matter of time. I knew even when I first started watching football that it was a matter of time before that kind of mentality seeped in. I thought it was very unique the way that football operated, But I didn't think it was going to be sustainable. And then I'll tell you, once I started seeing like $100 million transfer fees, these major oil companies coming in and nation states coming in to buy clubs, I realized that that's what's going to happen. That's what the effect of this bubble was going to be something where you're just going to have a group that is either not going to be that's going to band together and do exactly what we've done here. So, and there's a lot more to unpack there, but that was my initial reaction.
You're describing a continued trend along a change pattern that's already been in progress. And I actually wrote something that I want to kind of touch on in a little bit about that. So we can bounce back to that. Mikey, you were with me last night on our open mic show. We heard some of your comments there, but we had a pretty huge panel, and there was a lot of people sharing their views. And then you've spent all day today, since you got up at like 1:30 in the morning, as per usual, on Twitter. So I think the contrarian idea on this a little bit more, and so whether I'm right or wrong about that, let's hear where you stand.
I'll try to break it down a little bit. So the one thing that a lot of people are bringing up is the merit of being in this league. I'm not going to even call it a competition, because I fully agree that without a relegation type of situation, it's not a competition, right? Because you could afford to be mediocre and still cash in. So that's like the ultimate American thing ever, and there's no doubt about that. There was one of my biggest pet peeves with the MLS. Is exactly that. And I follow the San Jose Earthquakes, and I've always told my friends way prior to this is, man, I really wish this league had relegation, because I really hate, like NFL, for example, you doing worse actually gets you in a better position in a draft. So it drives me nuts. Absolutely drives me nuts. All this said, this is my
tell Danny how far it is to LA from where you live.
LA, I'm 5 hours out. So
yeah, so it'd basically be like Arsenal moving to Glasgow and saying that you could still go to every game. But anyway,
yes, exactly. It's a 45-minute flight. I'll be there. Don't worry, Danny.
That's crazy though. And sorry, Mike, but is that not the most American thing ever if we do move it outside of London?
Oh, we talked about
having a European Super League outside of Europe is the most American. It's like the World Series where we're the only country participating in it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all on the table. But sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No. So look, as far as merit, a lack of better words, or earning the right to be there, I this is how I look at it, and I know I've been rubbing people the wrong way on social media today, but you don't become a global brand by being a mid-table team. You become a global brand by being a successful team. Successful teams, literally, other than Spurs, successful teams are the ones that are being included into this. Juve, Milan, Inter, City, Manchester, Arsenal. You relate all these clubs with trophies, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, even if not so much lately, some of them. But yes.
Okay, yeah, no.
Other than Spurs, yes.
Other than Spurs, which I have my theory about that, and just thinking about Madrid, Barcelona, Milan, Inter. It's the North London derby.
They're bringing them along for the derby. They're not bringing them along for their history.
Essentially, that's my real point of view. So the way I look at it is in a weird, ugly way that a lot of people don't like to hear is, historically, we Arsenal, they're a big team. They're a massive club. They're a global brand. You don't get to be a global brand by being a mid-table team and not winning tournaments throughout your history. So therefore, because we are a successful team, because that is essentially what got us bought by a billionaire. And this is why we're in this tournament, because at one point in time, the club reached and achieved a height where it gave us a global appeal. Now, so I'm kind of, my initial reaction was with Jon is exactly what Jon said. I go, whew, glad we made the list. Because if we're right now, and this isn't in response to Ryan, because I totally understand what Ryan is saying as far as winning it the Arsenal way, the right way. But look, the PSGs, Cities, Chelseas, they're already doing this to football. That club just got bigger, is how I see it. So I'm speaking of a perspective. Of
And interestingly, they're not thrilled about this. The two of them.
Well,
you're just taking their competitive advantage away and giving it to more people. They're getting dragged along because they don't want to be left behind, but they weren't the ones that were for this.
Which one? The Spurs?
City and Chelsea.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So and I'm looking at this also in a viewpoint that I truly do not believe that this is going to ultimately end up replacing any leagues. I truly believe that Arsenal will continue to be part of the English Premier League. It's just we are going to benefit from the financial advantage that the other teams that are owned by countries have right now. So I look at it in a way of becoming more successful in a sense. But this is the dilemma, right? Is a lot of people, not everybody. How many times did we hear, hey, we'll look at Chelsea, look at City, as far as showing ambition, meaning spending a crap load of money every single season. Well, guys, you got what you wanted. We can now spend a crap load of money every single season. Now, there's two lines of thought between that. Ryan spoke about this initially in the pod. He's not thrilled about that because he wanted to do the traditional Arsenal way. And guys, I'm with you, Ryan. I really am. But I guess this is where you and I split ways. We could do it the Arsenal way, which ultimately, if we do not join this league, I don't see us ever winning the league ever again. Or we join the party and hope for the best as far as winning the league. But I don't see how you do not join this league as Arsenal and win the league. It's just I'm not saying it's impossible, but boy are the the odds against us at that point. It's a massive amount of money to turn around.
Yeah, assuming the Premier League stays intact. And Ryan, you mentioned when you were talking about how kind of part of the beauty of watching Arsenal was to hope that we could find the right combination and kind of win it in our way. And you could say, even though there's much more money on the profit on the sale and the buy side of the ledger, with Coutinho being sold and Suarez being sold and the players they brought in, this isn't a mom and pop organization, but they also didn't just dump $1 billion into the team over 5 years to build it either. And so they won a Premier League trophy in the kind of way that I think Arsenal supporters would like to have done it. But I'm not sure that all Arsenal supporters really care to win that way anyway. They just care to win. And, there's a lot of hypocrisy, I think, that Arsenal fans have come into. The traditionalists are wanting to win no matter what, but then they also don't want the game to kind of take that next step of evolution that we're seeing now, which is emotionally disturbing to them, and understandably so. So, I mean, I think to Mike's point, this has been happening already with certain teams. It just hasn't been a cartel of people doing it. It's been certain teams who just don't care about upsetting the equality financially in the league.
Yeah, and I completely understand that. But just for me, the moving into I've seen a few comments saying we should just sort of get on with it. But for me, I just can't. I just can't get on with it. It just feels so wrong. That's just my we're going into a thing. We're going to get 400 million more now every season. For me, okay, and then we go and buy, say, Jack Grealish and James Maddison, whatever. I'm just trying to think of.
All of a sudden, we start buying English.
All of a sudden, we start buying all these players from those teams. We make them weaker. We play in this thing, this European competition, and we get a little bit better. We're paying players. I know some people say it's not your money, but we're paying. Let's say we get to the point we're paying 200 million for a player because we got them. It probably wouldn't even happen under Conte, but let's just say we did, and then we paid 600,000 a week. I just can't. It don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, the transfer fees and player wages for 20 years have tracked almost exactly along the same graphical lines as the TV contracts have.
Yeah.
When the TV contract doubled, very quickly the 32 million pounds that would get you a Kun Aguero, in 2000 and whatever it was, all of a sudden to get a player of that quality, you had to spend 60 or even 90, and the 8 million pounds you could get a player for became 20, and it really, that level of inflation wasn't unusual considering the fact that the TV contract was also going up by 2.5 times during that same time frame. So everybody had proportionally the same amount more money, especially if you finished up top and had Europe. It's.
Can I cut across real quick, Mike, on that? Just something I brought up in our podcast group was, so that's very English league specific, because something that I had read and I brought up in our group, that in La Liga, the TV rights are negotiated per team. So as of right now, Barcelona and Real Madrid, they receive the lion's share of about 800 million in TV revenues, and the other 18 teams get like a tiny little portion.
Yeah,
so
they may split what a Barcelona would have got by
so
themselves.
Exactly. So in a really weird, twisted way, depending, like if let's say Barcelona and Madrid are no longer part of La Liga, that might actually benefit those other 18. Let's say 2 come up from the second division. That might actually work out with them, because somebody is going to televise that in Spain, and not, just talking about the TV revenue and everything. Somebody's going to watch them.
If La Liga revenues get cut by 80%, but the remaining 20% is giving the remaining 18 teams what they were already earning, then the quality of play does not go down, which is the bubble that will burst in the Premier League. So that's actually a pretty good point. I don't know the numbers involved there exactly, but I think you're right that could have a much different impact on a league like Spain, Italy, and the Premier League, based on how revenues are allocated. Because the Premier League is the closest thing to an American revenue sharing model, but still merit based, and still kind of feeds the top and feeds the bottom until someone can break out of being one and turn into the other. John?
Well, my understanding is, at least in England, is that as far as television rights, everyone gets an equal percentage of the television rights, and that's which is why you start seeing like an overall increase in the quality of the league, was because of this kind of socialistic distribution of wealth as it pertains to that. So I don't know if you're going to see the same effect if the big teams were to leave England versus Spain, at least with respect to that aspect of it.
So let's talk about Jose or Jose. I don't want to get it wrong. It's one or the other, probably. Stop talking hypotheticals about top 12 clubs being expelled. That will never happen. Agreed. I tend to agree with that. But the posturing from the local leagues, how much do you? I mean, when I think about it, the Premier League and maybe Serie A don't have any rational reason to want them to be kicked out because of what it would do to the TV contract, the quality of play, and that sort of thing. So, Ryan, do you think that the leagues are they're kowtowing to the feelings of UEFA, who has a lot of control over the leagues? It has control over what the leagues are allowed to do from a European title championship, from a European club level and national level. UEFA has a lot of reason for this not to happen, but do the individual leagues have that strong of a reason to be this threatening towards teams that are talking about and making it into a breakaway league, whereas the teams aren't looking to break away?
Well, look, the Premier League, the reason why it's so massive globally is because of the big six. I'm not saying teams like West Ham and Southampton in East London and on the coast don't have loads of loyal supporters, because they do. And in England that will continue to, they'll continue to go to games. I'm sure they will. But the value of the Premier League without the big six, if you want to call them that, the breakaway six, it is completely shatters what it is with them compared to what it is without. Just you're not going to get people from Singapore watching Burnley v West
Brighton.
Brom.
Yeah,
But whoever, you might get people from England still watching that. But you're not going to. So I think that, and the problem is the big six know their value. That they know their value in this. So that's why the powers that they've got and the greed that they can have is because they know that without the Premier League isn't even a quarter of the product it is without these sides. In terms of its global values. So, that was a very good point Mike made about Spain. It might work different there, but in terms of the English, can you imagine that? The scenario that we play the game. So you got this game on Wednesday against whoever, Real Madrid, and then you've got Saturday. You've got sort of. Fulham, we're already seeing in the Europa League that we sometimes prioritise the games once it gets to the knockout of the Europa League. So of course we're going to carry on prioritising that, and it will eventually the quality of it will either go two ways. It'll be so much. Arsenal will have such a strong squad that will be able to compete on both fronts. Or we'll use those games as that sort of a Carabao Cup kind of thing. And I don't know about you guys, right? But for me, if we had won the Champions League before, the league would always come ahead of Europe. Always. It's only because we've never won the Champions League that I'm so keen as an Arsenal fan to win it. But if we hadn't, it's always the league is 38 games. You play, it's such a slog. Like the feeling of winning that is an amazing feeling, and that, for me, that would triumph any other. That would triumph winning the Champions League. Well, if we had won the Champions League, if you see what I'm saying.
Right. No, I mean, and there's been discussion. I was watching a clip from a Sky Sports kind of piece on the whole ESL situation, and they had talked to some unidentified people within the clubs on boards. Employees of clubs, and there's a lot of the owners doing this, but the board doesn't want any part of it because the board are typically a little bit, especially with these clubs that are being mentioned, a little more traditionalists about football, and I think you may be seeing some resignations coming up and that sort of thing. But that one of the other things they said was there's every likelihood that we could see teams fielding weaker teams, just like early round FA Cup and Carabao Cup, like you said, in the Premier League. So you're either going to have 6 rich teams that are so rich and such a gulf in class of players that we are going directly back to the way it used to be, where there were 4 teams that were, the order of the 4 changed from year to year, but the fact that there were 4 never changed. And then there were always teams knocking on the door and they could never quite get there in the end. Everton, Villa, just never. And so you'll either see a complete lack, a bottoming out of the middle in the Premier League to where you have haves and have-nots beyond what we even have today, or the Premier League will kick the teams out. And I don't understand the threat to kick these teams out over this. I don't know what they think that they're going to accomplish by doing that.
There's one other point as well,
the teams already know that they would move forward even if that happened. Yeah,
just one other point as well, just that it just came to my head is, if we're playing, let's say we're playing Spurs, in this Super League thing, and then we've got them again on the Saturday. I mean, we already had, I remember not that long ago, where we had it was a couple of years ago, we beat Spurs. We beat Spurs 4-2, right, in the league. And then I think maybe 5 days later, or 10 days, we had them in the Europa League. Not the Europa League, the Carabao Cup. And I think they beat us 2-0. But it already felt like like an afterthought. And that was like a Carabao Cup quarter.
We
or
had that. We
semi-final.
had that this season with somebody. It wasn't
Right.
a North London derby, but we had a Wednesday and a Saturday game. We're like, which one should we prioritize? I think it was Southampton.
So these games, they just
Yeah, FA Cup.
they become these are meant to be special games, you know, against Spurs. Like you play them twice. All of a sudden, we're in, if we stay in, let's say we stay in the FA Cup, could be a scenario where we're playing Spurs like 7 times a season. It's just,
But is it not already kind of creeping in that direction? That's the thing I keep coming down to is you know, this is not being brought into a 1988 model where it's just a complete. I mean, we haven't seen the erosion of the way football used to be. I mean, and this is what I kind of jotted down earlier, by the way, because there's two. Well, sorry, I'm getting a little twisted around in my head here. This isn't coming out of the blue. This is almost this is an earth change or sea change, but in a progression. This is like global warming in a sense where we all have known for a long time this is coming and that everything's going to change, but a big thing happened just now where it's ever so much more imminent. But you know, there's an emotional and an analytical side to this. The emotional side of me hates this, and the more and more I start looking at it from the analytical side, you know, I put myself in the position of an Everton fan, of an Arsenal season ticket holder living in Essex, of an Arsenal fan who is proud of his team for saying no to the European Super League, but is now dealing with the consequences. You know, everything. I'm trying to look at it from all these perspectives, and I've come to the conclusion that there's two sets of fans, and this is probably the case with most football teams. Traditionalists or homegrown fans, and globalists. Age often is a relative factor. I think the older you are, the more likely you are to be a traditionalist. Location is a defining factor. The closer you live to Islington, the more likely you are to be not a 1-to-1 relative positioning of that, but you know, location's a factor. Family history is a factor. You know, Andy from our podcast is he says he's an 8th generation Arsenal supporter. I know Gav from Shewar says he's an 8th or 10th generation. I've done the math on that, and I'm not quite sure how that's exactly possible, but let's take their word for it. You know, maybe their family has kids when they're 16, you know, 14, 12 years old. But in any case, pragmatism and romanticism is a defining factor as well. And you know, I love the romanticism. I love being in the pub in Islington, like as a little boy sitting at the knee of the traditionalist, kind of hearing about Arsenal in the 70s and Arsenal in the 80s. And, you know, I mean, talking to Gooner Hollick, rest his soul, like talking to him for an hour at a pub before a game, it just makes me a better person, much less a better Arsenal fan. So that's a big part of my draw to Arsenal. But we're already in the midst, like John was saying, we're already in the midst of this 50-year transition that started in the 70s or 80s. You know, first it's English supporters, you know, supporting English clubs, usually your local club only in the 70s. Then in the 80s and 90s, it's, you know, England kind of expanded to Europe to where players were coming over, you know, from over there to here, and from here to over there. Guys like Gascoigne and Lineker and Platt and Souness and Liam Brady, even to an extent. I mean, you know, that there was acknowledgement that this is a more global game. You start having some Arsenal fans in Europe. You start having some Madrid fans in England. Just natural progression. And then in the 90s and 2000s, the game became truly global. Africa, Asia, North America getting involved, even if South America had kind of already been there to an extent because of Brazil and Argentina. Billions of eyes on the product, hundreds of new television contracts, tens and tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of money going into that. And we've seen how the game has changed already. Ownership changes in Manchester United and Chelsea. Gazillionaires buying teams and using their own personal funds, whether in the form of a loan, in the form of a bogus sponsorship deal, you know, or before the financial fair play mockery, just literally saying, I don't care. I'm going to bankroll a team that wins every year. That's already been happening. So it surprises me the extent of disgust that's there. And it makes me wonder whether in 20 years from now, just like we're 30 years off from when the Premier League started out of the first division, not comparing the two as being similar, but are we just going to look at that back and say, you know what, this was the obvious evolution of how it was going to work and not be disturbed by it? I have a hard time imagining that this isn't just another thing that 20 years from now is going to become the new norm. John, thoughts?
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think
that was like 20 minutes.
Yeah, it was like 20 minutes of speech. I don't know what part of that you want me to comment on, but I think that ultimately, this was definitely something that's been in the works for a long time. This was always going to be an inevitable kind of progression. I kind of mentioned it earlier of what was going to happen with the sport and how we were going to kind of move from this meritocracy. It wasn't going to be a thing, especially as more and more money started pouring in. The amount of money, when you start talking about this kind of money that the Premier League, that football in general is seeing, that's when you start to get kind of organizations like this to maximize that amount of money. And when you're not able to maximize that money, we're talking billionaire sports owners. They know how to play this game. They know how to make money from sports. It was always going to happen that they're going to maximize that. And this kind of shared model with the biggest teams. You really think that these billionaire sports businessmen or philanthropists, like, for example, do you really think that any of these these owners at Man City give a crap about Manchester or anyone living there? Do you really think if you really think that, I think you need to sit back and kind of
put money into local things, but because it builds the brand globally.
It builds the brand globally. It's good PR, and they get a tax write-off for a lot of it. Like, and because they, it's a way to make people happy. I listen. Because you're a businessman and you're a billionaire, does that mean you can't do philanthropic things? Yes, but at the end of the day, for the most part, it's about the bottom line for these people. It's always about the bottom line. And forget, I'm not going to talk about Manchester City anymore. Let's talk about Arsenal. You really think Kroenke cares about any of the fans? Like, really? Do you? I know you sat down and talked with him, Mike. You said, or well, at least Josh. So and look,
you had me going.
Yeah, be excited, right? Be excited. Look, they don't care about us. They don't. They care about making money. And guess what? They didn't become billionaires by not caring about making billions of dollars. Like, that was what they wanted to do. And it's not surprising that it's not surprising that this is where we're at. This is the pinnacle of maximizing the capital of sports. That's what this is. And like Ryan was saying, there's a degree of concern regarding watering down what makes this sport so precious. Like, yes, you can enjoy the Uptown Classic in baseball, or when the Yankees play the Red Sox, or when the Blackhawks play the Red Wings or whatever. But if they played them more time, you know what? All of a sudden we're going to play them every other week, multiple times. It's like it takes something away from it. And you kind of touched on that, this notion of the analytic side of you versus the emotional side. The emotional side is concerned that it's going to damage the sport in a way that makes you enjoy it less. And the analytic side is looking at this from what I started my entire kind of spiel when you asked me my initial feelings was that it was better for us to be on that list than off it.
Yeah,
that's that. And if this was inevitability and this was always going to happen, and it was just a question of whether we're on that list, it is vehemently better to be on that list than off it, and we are. So in that regard, I'm almost like, okay, I'm a little relieved because I have a friend who's an Everton fan, not on that list, and he's like, and I'm trying to look at it from his perspective, and what he told me was like, I as much as this is disgusting and whatever, the reality is I wish Everton were at that level as well, because it feels like we're gonna get left in the dirt, and to an extent he's probably right.
I sent a text to my West Ham buddy. Our kids used to play on the same team, and I told him I was like tongue in cheek. I was like, are you going to go over for the Premier League winning parade in a few weeks? Because I'm assuming that all the teams them and Leicester City are going to basically be fighting for the Premier League title tonight or this year after they kick all of the Super League teams out, or dock us 30 points in the standings or something like that. And he came back basically with just not even the I wish I was in it, but the he's angry.
Well,
he's very angry.
Guess what? Look, does the Premier League matter anymore now? Does the Premier League matter anymore? Does anyone care how we play? Do you think that City cares how they, all of a sudden City's talking about maybe getting taken out of the Champions League? So is Chelsea getting taken out of the Champions League. And I don't think that's going to happen. But at the end of the day, if this is where we're at right now, none of that stuff matters anymore. It doesn't.
In announcing it last night to get out of ahead of the UEFA announcement that came in this morning, those 12 teams fully knew, would have voted, would have acknowledged that even if they're kicked out of their domestic and international competitions, immediately that they would still be on board and that would not deter them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's crazy when you think of, and
the timing of it, like look at Florentino over at Atletico's president. It just so happens that this announcement comes shortly after he gets elected by unanimous vote as president of the club. Trust me, all of these things had to happen. This was not a coincidence, the timing of this. And like you said, right before this major announcement, but all these, because think about it, if you're the president of Atletico Madrid, right? You have what you know to be probably unanimous consent to become the next president of the club. You have this crazy proposal, there's going to be a lot of backlash for. You're going to wait and make sure that you don't get a seat that's going to challenge you to become the president, running on this campaign of European Super League. So it's the timing of this is relevant, and I think you have to look at it from where we're at right now and realize that they knew exactly what they were doing here. This wasn't a spur of the moment decision that wasn't considered and weighed out the pros and cons of it. They knew what the effect of this might be, and they knew the worst case scenario was, like you said, that the governing bodies come in and say you're not allowed to play in the league anymore.
Is there anybody, because I see a lot of people in the comments, and you guys have alluded to it, worried about tanking in the sense that there's no relegation in this league. Doesn't that kind of mean that they could benefit financially from this league, in which they could, let's say, throw away a game versus Barcelona? And doesn't that incentivize them in the sense that they can't be relegated, so they might transfer their interest in the league, because ultimately winning the league title is still fairly special. So in the sense that the league takes more priority, in the sense that you want to win the league, relegation still exists. I understand the relegation is even further a reality, right, because of the money that's involved. But don't you want to be competed in the league versus a league in which you can't be disqualified in? Does that make any sense?
From a perspective?
Yeah, well, not just as a club's perspective, right? So obviously, if you win the Super League, obviously it's gonna be great, right? But as far as if we're in two competitions, which essentially, let's say they're running hand in hand, you have an opportunity to win the league, and you want to keep your players, let's say on a sporting level, right? You want to keep them fresh and ready for the league, because you could top the league and become league champion, versus this ESL. You could essentially it's a throwaway game against Madrid. We're not going to win it anyways. Does that make any sense? Because there's no relegation in ESL.
I think the answer is just that we don't really know what it's going to turn out, right? We don't know what the reception is going to be to the Super League, if anyone's even going to care about it. Because it might be the case where that's still the league that's prioritized, and if that's the case, obviously the league is very important, but
not with the amount of money that's been thrown around. Exactly. It's impossible. And what we don't know is we've learned a little bit more about the sporting plan as far as the conferences and the playoffs. And I'm intentionally using NFL terms right now because that's really how it's being set up. We know about the franchises, the conferences, and the playoffs. What we don't know is the incentivization program, because, look, what does not appear to be the case, and God help us if this ends up happening, although I haven't thought through why it would be so bad versus good, but I know it would be bad. The one thing in American sport in a closed league versus this closed league that occurs would be there's not a draft. There's not an entry draft. Not yet. I guess you could speak, John, to the MLS and how that works. But tanking and being bad and being okay with being bad, and frankly, taking a game less seriously or throwing it. I mean, not throwing it, but just not caring as much, playing a weakened lineup, should and probably will have some sort of impact in this kind of a league. Finishing second has got to be better than finishing ninth. In the Premier League, it is even already, even though there's only one title on offer and there's only one top four on offer. Finishing 12th is still better than finishing 17th.
Well, you make a lot of money by winning the Champions League. It has to be some kind of financial incentive. And that financial incentive, if they're smart, is going to be more than winning the league.
Right. And Ryan, I mean, now there are going to be these 5 floating teams that come in and out, but what do you think happens if, let's say Arsenal's.
I love how much of a traditionalist you are, Ryan. Like to be completely, like to have this feeling that you're like completely and utterly.
I want that though. I want to feel. I want to feel the way that you do, and part of me does. I'm just. It's.
But do you know what, Mike? It's not that I'm such a traditionalist in terms of I do believe that the Champions League needs a revamp. It's quite boring to watch the group stages, and I thought that even when we were in it, to be honest with you. So I'm not, if this new league, if this Super League, was done in the same way that, let's just say that we were invited. Let's say we were invited in for the first one, right? We're invited for the first one, but then after that, it's the top 4 from the domestic leagues that go in. As much, I would be a lot more for it, I think.
Right, but it wouldn't exist. The ESL wouldn't exist under those parameters because those are the parameters that they're specifically trying to escape from. For the
Champions League, essentially, it should be.
They want the sure thing. They want the regular, reliable income, not necessarily the opportunity to get a windfall that's even greater. Because you can plan and budget based on that. I mean,
and that's probably where I'm a traditionalist, because that's not football.
No, but what happens if there's 20 teams in this league, 5 of whom rotate in and out every year, and one of the 5 teams wins the ESL Super Bowl? Like there's going to be 2 divisions of 10, so there's going to be 2 conferences. So there's going to be, the Pele division, and no, not Pele because he's not European, but there'll be the 2 different
Arsene Wenger division and the
Jose Mourinho division.
Sir Alex. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I was going to go with Sir Alex as well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, that makes more sense, but they can't. Anyway, if the 5 teams that have just come in that year make the playoffs and finish 6th and 7th, and then Arsenal and AC Milan and Spurs finish dead last in their leagues, and then the team that's 10th in their conference, 20th overall, stays in, but the team that came in and finished 4th or 6th doesn't. There's so much to learn about how this is going to work.
Where do these teams? Where do these 5 teams come from? For example,
well,
it's nebulous. They haven't really explained it.
It's nebulous, and it's going to involve some cooperation with the domestic leads, which is ironic.
Let's, for example, say 2 come from the Premier League. There's another 2 from. Then all of a sudden, you got 7 teams in this Super. No, sorry, you'd have 8 teams in this Super League
20
out of 20 from the Prem. Then you've got to play those games as well in the league. So you'd almost feel like you're playing the same opponent every.
Well, and they'll have to work out how the Prem. Let's say so you're saying if we're still in it, that would happen. So then all of a sudden the top 8, presumably, assuming the 6 that are in finish top 6, which we can't assume, the next 2 get into the Super League. So then is the remaining Champions League that's still trying to stay alive taking the 9th and 10th place teams as their English representatives? This is meant to and likely will kill the Champions League and the Europa League.
That's another argument. Having this league without Bayern Munich, I
think Bayern and PSG are actually going to come in. I think
Well,
they're just not yet.
If they don't, then it's not a super league. Without PSG, I'm not as bothered because of sort of their recent success has come with a lot of Bayern are, a huge
by all measures.
Yeah. But one thing I really wanted to say was I don't see why we can't just say that how the American sports system really works for American culture, and the way we do it in Europe works for the European culture. I don't get what's like. So you guys there might be the Americans who love having all the big games a lot, or having for basketball seven games to go. There might be that, and that.
We're just so conditioned to it here, Ryan.
But there's nothing wrong with it, Mike. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's just we don't want to do that in England or in Europe.
There's enough wrong with it that a lot of us have sought something different and found it in Arsenal and in the Premier League and in world football.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, there's a reason that I go, it's Arsenal, then the Washington Capitals. You can't even see how low I'm going here. I mean, I love the local hockey team here. It's my second favorite sport. I love going to it in person, but if given the choice between supporting the Capitals and Arsenal, goodbye hockey.
Really quick. Ryan makes a really good point, and I really kind of want to emphasize it, because the answer to that, or if you can call it an answer, is that it has nothing to do with the fans. It is not about what the fans like or what they want to see. It's about the fact that the derbies make the most money on TV off selling subscriptions. That's what people want to watch. That's what this is about. And that's the kind of overarching, disappointment of this whole process. They don't give a they don't care. They don't care what the fans want. They don't care if you want to see 10 North London derbies. You're gonna watch. There's gonna be more people watching that than Burnley versus Aston Villa or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? So they know that, and that's why I think that you kind of pointed out, or someone, I forget who, the actual teams that are in this league are not a coincidence. I think it was Mike. And it's not because they care about what the fans want and that they know that we like to watch North London Derby. It's because their numbers tell us that these are the biggest, richest clubs that are going to join us and give us the most power in the sport and the most numbers on the television screen.
So,
Mike, you had something you wanted to say, and then I want to chime in. But
absolutely. No,
you've been bursting at the seams.
That's great, because I completely forgot what I was going to ask. I'm following on Ryan's.
You got to write it down
right now. Back. John and I, maybe potentially even Mike, might seem okay with this ESL. We're not happy it's forming. It's almost like we're accepting it as inevitability. I think there's the word right there. It's inevitable. We don't see it stopping. So we rather, I think, I'm going to speak for you a little bit, John. We rather be in that club than out of the club. But I don't think anything's going to stop it. So for what it's worth, I'm not pro this. This is not something I like. I've had major issues with PSG and Manchester City. I've always kind of written off their recent success. In matter of fact, one thing I brought this up when Liverpool won the league was City won the league. The City won the league, and I'm like, money. Chelsea won the league. I'm like, money. Liverpool won the league, and I'm like,
damn it, they did it.
Fuck, we could have done that, but we didn't. Same. So I totally understand where Ryan's coming from. So I'm not pro the tournament. I'm simply making a choice whether I'm like, I have to be there or not be there. I guess I want to be part of that club. One question, if I may, Mike, before you move on the conversation, if just John, Ryan, and you, just a yes or no question, because I find this fascinating that some people are saying no to this. Stan the Man said this yesterday. John, just hypothetically speaking, Arsenal are no longer in the league. They are exclusively playing in the ESL. Do you support Arsenal, or do you drop your interest? Because there's a lot of people are actually saying that they would drop the interest in supporting Arsenal. And
I can't.
I can't. How about you, Ryan? If there was,
I would. I'd drop the interest.
Look at that.
I'd still be interested. But I wouldn't be like I am now.
The club is literally, well, literally is, I'm using literally wrong again, but more than just about anybody else, the club is in your blood.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you took some blood out and looked for the club in there,
It would be red. It would be red.
So it is
blood
red.
would be red.
Yeah. I'm not implying you bleed Arsenal, but like it is in your bloodline. Connections to it, and it's so that is a significant statement.
No, it is, but
although QPR is, in your it's in. I was gonna say one's in your blood, the other's in your urine, but that's no one needs to say that. But yeah, so would you become a QPR supporter? Like
nah. I still would want. I can't imagine being invested like this, like coming onto a podcast and thinking about Arsenal every day and every night like I do now in without being domestically in the league. I can't. It would feel like a different club.
Yeah.
Me
and the guys at App are going to start podcasting about Argentine League pretty soon. So we're going to either rename it Not Another River Plate podcast or Not Another Boca Junior podcast. We're still debating that. Okay, Mike. Sorry for interrupting. Go.
Hold on. I'm just fixing my wardrobe here.
You know what? I'm not sorry I interrupted, Mike. I should have known. Go ahead.
All right. Well, you mentioned, John, before the Yankees. And, think about and you don't have to be an American to understand what the Yankees symbolize or have symbolized over time. The Yankees in the 1930s, 20s, 30s, 40s were a team that I would have ventured to say most people who were fervent fans of theirs lived in New York, and they even had three teams to choose from. But they had the Dodgers, they had the Giants, and the Yankees, and once television came into it, and it went from being the traditionalist to the globalist type of game, you had fair weather fans in LA that became Yankee fans, New Orleans that became Yankee fans, in every bit of the world. And stupid thing off. And the Yankees quickly realized that, it doesn't matter whether, the Yankees stopped winning things for a long time too. And it just didn't matter because they were the Yankees. They're the Manchester United. They win because people watch their games on television and not just in attendance. And the fact that the local attendance has become, even for Arsenal, who makes one of the highest, gate receipts and game day revenues, the attendance has almost become insignificant.
Certainly nowadays,
compared to the, if attendance was more significant, COVID would have killed these teams, literally ended them. Instead, it's just caused them to have some losses, and that's that's what they've realized. And I'm going to rip this off of the Highbury squad because I was watching that before we went on the air, and there was a guest on there who said that from a marketing perspective, teams know that there's two sets of supporters that they have. And again, I want to credit the guy's name, but I can't remember. It might have been Joe, who I think is a Newcastle supporter, but he said there are ultras and casuals. And ultras isn't necessarily referring to, people who are starting fires and holding up racist signs and banging on drums. It means people who are just, most of us are more than likely ultras because we'll watch every game that includes Arsenal. We'll watch U23 games if it's convenient for us to do that. We'll spend money to go and join the team on a tour. We'll go to London as often as we can. And, we are Arsenal no matter what. And then there's the casuals who watch it because it's being put in front of them and they want to, learn more about the game. There's about an 85-15 split in revenues ultimately that are driven by ultras versus driven by casuals. And the casuals are the 85%. And that's what this entire model is built off of. Dismissing the need for ultras as it used to be, because the ultras were the ones that filled the stadiums. The ultras were the ones that bought the merchandise. Now it's casuals. It's casuals buying merchandise for their kids. It's casuals watching on TV, supporting higher TV contracts, which allows the teams to line their pockets. and further enhance their global brand by buying bigger players and winning things. And, you know, this isn't solving anything. This isn't an endorsement of it by me, but the owners see this, and they're not around to worry about the legacy of the game, or even their legacy in the game.
Yeah,
they're there to make money, and frankly, they may see themselves, as large as they've become, they may see themselves as being more, you know, just giving than taking, because, you know, they may not truly be getting their portion of the revenues. Maybe with the exception of Barcelona and Real Madrid, they may not be getting their truly deserved portion of the revenues because of a more socialistic approach to even the Premier League. Totally socialistic approach we see in the U.S. because of the desire for parity. But, you know, if you were a shareholder in Juventus or Real Madrid, two public, or Manchester United, two publicly traded stocks, you saw what shareholders think of it.
Well, you saw
shareholders aren't fans, but they're the one. You know, every corporation, their one goal is to cater and provide the maximum value to their shareholders. And that's exactly what these clubs are doing. And it rips my heart out that it has to be talked about in those terms, but no one's going to change it. No one's going to stop it.
You saw what happened to the market, you know, with Juventus stock and Man United stock. And that's indicative of investment in the club. So when you're, and just going back to something that I think Bulgarian Gooner kind of pointed out, which is something that kind of was a response to your question. The way that they look at these fans, these legacy fans, they don't really care. And I agree. They don't care about any of the fans that have been supporting and that, you know, will bleed red no matter what. That's not what they care about. They want to get a new generation of fans. They want to be the future of the sport. So what they did was essentially say, if you want to watch football at the top level with the best teams in the world, the top biggest clubs, the one that you might not know anything about football, but you know Real Madrid, you know Man United, you know Arsenal, you know Chelsea, you know Man City, you know Juventus, you know all these teams. If you want to watch them, you're going to watch our league. That's how it works. It doesn't matter. We don't care anymore. We don't care anymore about our even domestic leagues. We want to get you to watch the sport. Like you said, that's the casual fan. And that's exactly what they're doing. They don't care about the legacy fan who is probably more of the ultra fan. They care about the new generation of fan. And to that end, I cannot wait to see the marketing effort of this European Super League. It is going to be unreal, the marketing that's about to go in if this league thing ends up finishing out. I don't even know what it's going to look like. I don't even. But yeah, I'm just thinking. Think about the marketing that's about to undertake. The push that they're going to make. The hundreds of millions that they're going to spend on marketing. It's going to be crazy. I don't even know what it's going to be crazy.
By the way, to Daniel Robert, I did go and peek at the Twitter, and of course he's the gentleman you've mentioned is using this to basically slag off Arsenal supporters even further. But so yeah, Bulgarian Gooner, still waiting to hear from Vinay. He was so eager to connect with us a year ago. I'm still waiting to hear from him too. I've sent him many emails to follow up on our wonderful conversations that we had in Denver and Washington, D.C. over the summer of 2019, where the club wanted to be more transparent and communicate through alternative media, and it's never quite been the right time. So I don't know. I mean, I really like the guy. I like the guy from when I met him. I felt like his heart was in the right place, but it is hard to see these things happen and have very little communication with and transparency towards the supporters. And, you know, he's just canceled, as I understand it, a communication-based event on Thursday that is, you know, meant to discuss the overall state of the club, and he's just pulled himself from the schedule on that. Not surprising, but disappointing.
That's very disappointing in the sense that you saw there was a video circulating online. I think it was Pull and Leeds, right? They're getting booed, and now the Leeds players are the ones like wearing a shirt saying "Stop it." And we know that the next interviews that the not even just the Super League managers, but all the managers. Football is going to be set aside in the next coming weeks completely in every single interview with players, managers, and they're the ones that are going to be dealing with all the repercussion and all the backlash with everybody asking them these questions. And no matter what they say, they're not going to be, fans aren't going to be happy if you're, on one side or the other. And then our clubs, the 12 clubs involved, just throw out some generic, hey, we're founding and this is what's going to happen. And it's really piss poor on the ownership. I know not a lot of us here are big fans, or we don't agree with a lot of the ways that the ownership and Arsenal operate, but this is like next level, like Vinay, like just canceling that, like, I'm just going to let Arteta just deal with all the backlash when he, in his Thursday night, whenever it is that he's going to talk about the Everton game. As like Mikey likes to say, if the Everton game takes place, of course. But it's really piss poor because the managers and the players are just going to get bombarded with questions. And realistically, I mean, from new comments that are coming out from like Klopp that recently spoke, said he didn't know anything about it. The players didn't know anything about it. So even they're, are going through a transition.
Arteta said that, and I think he's full of shit. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything about this.
You think so? You think that a billionaire owner? That's kind of what John's point. You think so, John?
He's not just the coach; he's the manager, though. I mean, he's.
I think this is above him.
I don't think he knew the effect or the immediacy of what was going to happen. I think maybe broad strokes, and I wouldn't be surprised if he knew something about it, but he's not going to be able to say anything. And he's not going to be able to publicly oppose it. Which
not
really
saying anything and saying that you don't know anything about it are two different things. But.
Well, saying anything about it, even if you did know it. So what is he going to say? Yeah, I know, but I'm not going to tell you. No. So it's just like,
nanny boo.
Yeah. I know exactly. I know all about this, but I can't say anything. No, he's going to say I don't know anything about that. And that's probably what he's been told to say. I think that I think he definitely knew something about this. It's hard to imagine it. Arsenal is I don't know. It seems difficult to fathom that he didn't know anything. Whether how much he knew or what when he knew it is a different thing. But there was some kind of a sense that this was going on. And I don't want to wear a tinfoil hat, but we're always wondering what's going on with these. You look like Aubameyang and all these players and like how they perform on the pitch. I wonder how much rumblings were actually happening that neither could have been confirmed nor denied. And you can't imagine that like. They were that successful at concealing this from everyone. It's about money, bro. This is all about money. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Sorry. But it is.
You know how this could instantly win over all of the traditionalist supporters and fans and the people who are, who hate the way that the game is headed. If the Super League just basically came out with a press conference today, 5 letters, 2 words, no VAR. And then everybody would just fall, like everyone would be just magically in love with the idea already. And
weren't they talking about having like referees with? I would forget VAR. I want my refs mic'd up in this league. If we're gonna do this, I want to hear everything. I want to hear the decisions they make. I want to hear their conversations regarding VAR, regarding giving a penalty, not giving a penalty, and I want them to have to be interviewed after each game. That's how you win me over.
At the risk of turning it into the XFL, and someone made a comment earlier, but I don't think that I'm talking about for a different reason, where you're making these tweaks to not to the rules of the game, but to the way it's presented and maintained and legitimized. Honestly, one of these two sides ought to get working on this. It sucks that they haven't found a way to address inequality in the rules and inconsistency, I should say, in the rules. It sucks that they haven't found a way, sucks is too light of a word, that they haven't found a way to have the same level of emotion and urgency about racism as they have about this. All the things that are far more important than this that haven't been dealt with, and all of a sudden this is everybody's first priority, is a little sickening. But I mean, the strongest thing anyone could do to try to curry favor is start putting in some of these changes and say, we are going to be transparent when it comes to refereeing. Because for many traditionalists, for many people who love the Premier League and don't want anything to change to the Premier League, but also gripe constantly about the rule changes in the Premier League and the lack of financial fair play or the existence of financial fair play, you know, a little bit of hypocrisy going on there. But if the league really listened to people and started implementing some of those things, they'd probably curry a lot more favor. Not to the most hardcore people. They're not going to win Drago over with rule changes, but you know,
you gotta think that factored into this whole decision by the ownership as well. This sense of powerlessness in this bureaucratic, corrupt organization like FIFA and UEFA. Because one thing that we haven't touched on is these. You know, you can't feel bad for FIFA and UEFA. They are some of the most despicable organizations on planet Earth. They're up there in terms of like human rights violations, not caring about anything but money and the bottom line. So there is almost a sense of kind of sticking it to them, which I kind of like about this whole Super League. So if there is a pro in the pro column of the Super League, in addition to what people in the chat are saying that they're going to have mic'd up referees, which would be kind of sweet. Just the we're not going to take it anymore attitude, that we don't have to listen to you guys anymore, is kind of something we've all wanted the clubs to do for a while. The problem is it's kind of like, have you seen The Matrix? Remember when he's about to pull Switch's cord out and she's like, not like this?
The only thing I know about The Matrix is this.
And the blue pill, red pill. Well, there's a moment where like she's kind of looking, one of the characters looking at the screen and says, not like this. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I want them to stand up to FIFA and UEFA. I want them to implement rule changes. I just wish that it wasn't at the result of, wasn't at the expense of the soul of the club. Yeah,
no, I agree. And as we get closer to an hour and a half, and I know that it's almost 11 o'clock over by you, Ryan, we're gonna start to wrap up. My question for you is, what outcome now that we are where we are, the cat's out of the bag, how can you envision yourself in August at the beginning of the next campaign being as much of an Arsenal supporter as you felt yesterday? Like, is there a scenario that can pan out with that?
What, with this European Super League?
Yeah, I mean, is the scenario that we say no to it and deal with the consequences, or is the deal that, you know, or I mean, what? I mean, is it already too late for you? Is what I'm asking.
No. If we were to come out and say, which I know is not going to happen, that we got it wrong and, you know, do this, or we misjudged, blah blah blah, and, you know, we realized
Kroenke saying that.
Yeah, not just, you know, the whole reverse it back. Then I could, because I love the club so much, I could forgive. I can't. At the minute where I'm, you asking me this now, I can't get excited about Arsenal being a Super League club the way they've got into it. I just can't.
So if they said no to they said, you know what, we've listened to our supporters for the first time in 20 years, and we're gonna kind of uphold the legacy and the Arsenal way, and try to, you know, stick with the Premier League and not this. But it goes ahead without us anyway. I mean, because it seems likely that will, unless, you know, the only thing that might happen is that there's a lot of money that's struck in a deal to help grassroots football and to prevent the complete void that would occur. But if it goes forward as planned and we're not part of it, I know that you're, you know, and I think I could speak for all four of us, we wouldn't become lesser Arsenal fans just because all of a sudden our best players get snapped up because we can no longer afford to keep them under the television deal that's going to replace the current one when it's over, which would probably be 80% lower revenues. You know, we're not going to start supporting the team because of that. But, you know, are just checking. You would be okay with that kind of becoming something more of a
100%.
Yeah, and because it'd be a really aggravating 5 or 6 year slide watching Arsenal slide from being, you know, having the opportunity to be world class football to being, you know, essentially Brentford.
And the
60,000 seater.
it's true. The only thing is it only takes, and because we've got Kroenke, who's obviously such a key player, it's not going to be us. But it does only take if Man City now suddenly pull back, and then Chelsea pull back as well, because you said those two aren't totally interested, aren't totally for it, right? If those two all of a sudden pull back, there's no Bayern, there's no PSG, there's no Borussia Dortmund. It all of a sudden it starts weakening and then let's just say a few of the players say, well, I'm not playing in that, and a few managers say, I do think it is not. I'm probably very naive, but I don't think it's quite over just yet.
That's interesting because that could, I mean, that would be the sea changes that before UEFA and FIFA and the associations make their move, the players, well, the club, I mean, players speaking out against it that play for teams that are all in, like Arsenal and Liverpool, they're in deep shit if they say something about it. But if, the clubs like Manchester City and Chelsea are like, you know what, we're not having this, and we're going to keep the quality of play in the Premier League high. We're going to win it every year, but we're going to keep the quality high. We're going to help keep the contract higher than it otherwise would be from a revenue standpoint, and therefore that does kind of indirectly help the Wolves and the Villas and those sort of teams. Then I don't know that the Super League just goes and said, oh yeah, City and Chelsea, you're out. Well, we'll go and get Leipzig.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Like, that isn't going to be the same. And then what happens if City qualifies as one of the 5 teams based on whatever criteria they have? Then they're right back in. But that is kind of the one potential crack in the armor that I think could happen, unless contracts have been signed and money has changed hands already, which every likelihood that it has. And in which case City can't do anything about it.
Yeah. Random thought that just occurred to me, because in England the TV revenue is distributed throughout the league, not per team. Isn't there a small chance? I'm throwing this out there, trying to be the ultimate optimistic on this one.
Nice.
6 teams become better in 2 seasons, right? The 6 teams in ESL. You go back to renew the TV deal. I'm talking about Sky Sports or whatever other TV company comes back to the league and say, hey, we want to do a brand new deal. Then in return, the league says it's going to cost you more because now we have these 6 teams that are significantly better off. Do they get more money, and on like trickle down, do the other 14 teams get a boost as well?
So
do you know what I mean?
Is the question, does it no longer become like a kind of socialistic model, but it's more like La Liga, is what you're asking?
Well, I'm saying that if the England, very England specific, if the TV revenues, Mike pointed out earlier in the podcast that TV revenue go up, money that the clubs get goes up, right? It goes hand in hand. So next time there's a renewal for the contract for the league, English league, can't the English league say, hey, now because these 6 teams are participating in the ESL, our global appeal to these 6 teams have more marketing, more viewership. We're going to need more money in order for you to be able to stream or however show our league.
I see what you're saying.
More money means there inevitably more money has to go down to Wolves, Everton, et cetera, et cetera. Wouldn't that be beneficial?
Yes. If that's what happens.
I mean,
right?
how I just looked at it like, how could they not, right? Because if the 6 teams get dramatically better and more teams join the league or join the 6 teams in the Super League, and those 6 teams all of a sudden, let's just say we take out the Nenny out of our squad and we make a massive upgrade like Francis Coquelin. Man, I missed it.
I was about to say that. I was like, oh, we're going to replace him with Coquelin.
I love myself some Coquelin. I'm sorry, but if the overall squad,
I'm gonna clip that, and I'm gonna end it before you.
We know what's gonna happen.
If the overall teams get better, there's
1 hour 34 seconds 40. All right.
there's reason to believe that the league could ask for more money.
That's a great point. I never even thought about that. That's a great point because really, a rising tide floats all ships kind of a thing. And if there's more exposure to the big clubs, can't they get more money from the? From
that's the that's the ESL's that's their statement on their website is basically and believe me, if you see that statement as being full of absolute shite,
it is. It's hard to kind of navigate that.
It's because it is, but there is some rationale behind that, and Mike's just exposed that rationale, which is that they're viewing this from a trickle down economic type of scenario, where don't you want better teams in your leagues? Why would you kick those teams out of your leagues? And and that is why I have to speculate that the ferocity of the opposition, when you take the emotion out of it, the ferocity of I know that, but
it's not really
billionaire. It works for billionaires.
It's not really though, because we're not giving the majority of the wealth to one group of people. We're actually renegotiating contract. At least in Mike's world, we're renegotiating the contract because of the exposure of the bigger clubs. So now there's a more valuable product in the league, which now gets those other, when they're renegotiating the contracts with Sky or BTV, whatever, they're going to now say, well, we need more money because more people are going to watch because of these big teams that are on there now.
It's not so much trickle down economics. It would be like changing monetary policy, like making the dollar more valuable all of a sudden for everybody.
Yeah, or increasing the value of a product.
Yeah,
and
that's what has me wondering what the motivation of the associations are, other than to be fearful of what UEFA will do to them if they're not opposing this.
Yeah, I mean, someone's still saying that is trickle down economics. It's not. I'm not giving the wealthy the money and then it's going to somehow come down to everyone else. It's that we are going to get a bigger contract because there's more negotiating tactic. There's more negotiating power now because we have a more valuable commodity in the league. If the ESL raises Chelsea, City, Arsenal, all these teams, Spurs, and more viewership, these new fans come in, they're gonna. And this is correct me if I'm wrong. That's what you're saying, Mike. Right now,
yes.
all of a sudden, as a collective bargaining tool, the entire league gets to turn to these television providers and go, "You're going to give us more money now," which will give more money since there is already the socialistic method in the Premier League. More money to teams like Fulham or whatever that might not. Well, I guess they might not be in it, but you know what I mean. But all these teams that would benefit from an increased contract with these television providers.
I think Ryan's phone is close to dying, and he's absolutely awesome.
I promised him 5 times that we were getting ready to wrap up. You're
I can go and get my charger if you want to carry on.
Well, you know what? I'm about to run out of charge, and I don't mean my computer. I mean me. Yeah. So
he needs to make a clip out of me. So
there is so much good content out there. Highbury Squad finished earlier with some great guests. Tom Canton, I'm still working on trying to get Gab Marcotti. He's a little busy right now, but I would love to speak with him about this and get his perspective. So we hope to bring you more content on it. But this is going to kind of wrap it up for today. John, Mike, Ryan, thank you for joining tonight.
Thank you so much.
Ryan, anything you're up to, or I always ask you this, and you're like, no, I'm just kind of chilling.
Yeah, nothing. Just hoping the club will reverse the decision. There we go.
Well, we'll keep in touch about that. John, any Miami podcasts coming up?
Probably not. Not for a while. This is not the time to get started. Hey guys, let's talk about that game last night. I feel like this is the worst time to do that.
You could just start a financial podcast, or we could just start a podcast together where we talk to each other like 3-year-olds and just call it WhatsApp Live.
WhatsApp Live. The super chat.
Yeah, exactly.
Super chat.
Mikey, thanks for being my side man, my front man, my behind man. I'm surrounded by you. I feel like one of your children.
It's been an absolute pleasure hopping on board to this project. So Thank you very much. Of course, it's always been a pleasure. And as far as my podcast that I do on the side, it's a weekly podcast called Not Another Arsenal Podcast. We are actually doing a show tonight. If anybody's awake, that's 7:30 Pacific
What are you going
time.
to be talking about?
Fulham, man. We're not over that VAR decision, so definitely nothing else. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again to the chat, Mike. Good to see you. Everyone else, take care and come on. See, I always start that, and I don't have the damn thing ready yet. So
come on, you Super League Gooners.
Yeah, come on, you Super League Gooners.
Oh.